Once again, all my examples, though, they're about men. They're about male traits and female choice. Darwin, however, thought that females were the more attractive sex and that males did the choosing. I don't know why. Perhaps it's our proclivity for, I don't know, red shoes, kind of like those red finch bracelets. But this is a very Western and a very modern interpretation. In the 1700s, men wore wigs and makeup, as did the women. Maasai, Maori, and New Guinea men are stunning, really. And they're much more ornamented than their women in their societies, and you could actually consider them as wearing makeup. So pointing to women because of our proclivity to wear makeup is, again, it's being very Western-centric. Behaviorally, too, there's a certain male-male competition involved in attracting the girls, a tendency to show off for the ladies. In selection in relation to sex, Darwin compared the actions of young men to those of birds lecking for the attention of females. He said, if an inhabitant of another planet were to behold a number of young rustics at a fair, courting and quarreling over a pretty girl, like birds at one of their places of assemblage, he would be able to infer that she had the power of choice only by observing the eagerness of the wooers to please her and to display their finery. You gotta love John Travolta. Certainly in Western society, though, it's difficult to dispute that appearance is something the so-called fairer sex takes to further extremes. One thing that has been studied a fair bit is the waist-to-hip ratio. And perhaps that's not surprising if you know anything about fashion styles and the tendency to emphasize the hips and de-emphasize the waist, thanks to corsets and bustles and things. Basically, the waist-to-hip ratio studies are about how curvaceous women are. It's not about how heavy they are or skinny. It's about their relative sizes of their waist to their hips. So someone like Marilyn, or your classic 36, 24, 36 body, is a waist-to-hip ratio of about 0.7. Actually, more accurately, it'd be 36, 26, 36, although that's not the one that's usually thrown out there in the media. So what does that 0.7 mean? In a study of both United States and Indian young men, it was found that overwhelmingly they preferred a waist-to-hip ratio of 0.7 compared to that of 0.9. So a waist-to-hip ratio of 0.9 means that your waist and your hips are about the same, which is what we might see in men, for example. This study has been repeated in many societies, and it's often found to be true. It's held in many, many cases. And it's often interpreted as selection for fecund women. We do know that medically anorexic women who would perhaps have a more straight up and down waist-to-hip ratio stop menstruating and are often incapable of having children. And this actually provides some insight into some of the exceptions. There are several exceptions to the 0.7 rule in foraging pre-modern societies. In these foraging societies, higher ratios, closer to 0.9, are favored. In such societies, overall female weight may be a better predictor of reproductive success because these societies often have more difficulty in finding enough food. A really neat idea in a British group was to actually take information from personal ads and look at what that tells us about choices. These are called Lonely Hearts ads in Britain, which is just so cute. And in the study of more than 400 Lonely Hearts ads, the researchers found that although more men, which are shown in the black bars, than women, shown in white, advertised for attractive mates, more women, same colors, advertised for men with resources. This is the classic divide. So one of the things that was shown in the quotes before the talk was the quote from Summertime. Your daddy is rich and your mama's good looking, right? A more recent study of speed dating in the US showed similar results in written questionnaires. The young men involved said that they were interested in finding an attractive mate, and the young women said that they were looking for someone with good earning potential. What's funny, though, is that after going through the speed dating, where you spend your 2 minutes talking to everybody, both men and women, all in their 20s, went for attractiveness when they identified the ones they most wanted to meet again. So although we see these kinds of divisions between attractiveness and resources, that's not always how we choose mates. In fact, often those choices are not conscious, not just for animals, but also for us. We often choose for things that we might be completely unaware of. And one of those things is MHC. This is the major histocompatibility complex. Basically, if there's greater genetic variation for MHC, that means that you will be less susceptible to things like pathogens and parasites. So think of genetic variation for MHC as meaning greater immunity. Why am I telling you about this? Well, there's these great studies of sweaty t-shirts that maybe you've seen in the popular media. So basically, the idea of these sweaty t-shirt studies is that, again, our favorite study organism for psychology studies, undergraduates, are asked, both men and women, to not shave their armpits, if they're women or men, and not bathe for several days, and wear a t-shirt for 2 to 3 days in a row. And then those t-shirts are put into little bags, and then they're offered to other poor undergraduates to smell. And then the undergraduates say which ones they find the sexiest. I think they might give them $5 or something, or extra credit in the class, but I don't know. Anyway, this is one of the there's been lots of these studies. Here's one interesting result. What we see here is the y-axis is correlation between pleasantness, how much they liked the way it smelled, and the similarity between the person doing the sniffing and the sniffy's MHC. So remember, if genetic diversity is good, you'd want to mate with somebody who's pretty different from you. And what we find is that basically people are discriminating against people who smell means they have similar MHC. That sounds kind of convoluted. I'll try that again. So basically, they don't like the smell of individuals that are similar genetically to themselves. And the one exception is young women who are on the pill, who are incapable of getting pregnant. It's fascinating. Here's another MHC study. Turns out that in couples that have been together for an extended period of time, considered stable couples, if MHC is similar between the man and the woman, their sex lives are worse. So what this shows is the female response to her partner goes down the more similar she is to her mate. She doesn't respond to him so well if his MHC is similar to hers. These women were more likely to cheat on their partners, and they were much more likely during the most fertile point in their cycles to rate other men as attractive. So what is this about the cycle that's interesting? So what we see here is selection for symmetry. So that says preference for symmetry. Symmetrical features are often considered, not just in humans, but in many animals, to be an indicator of genetic quality. And what we see is that over her cycle, a woman's preference for symmetry changes. And it's highest right around the time she's ovulating and she's most fertile. The other thing that peaks around that time is her preference for men with features that she associates with a good partner for a fling. So what we see, this is preference for males' social presence and direct intersexual competition. Basically, outgoing men that are likely to get in a bar fight over you. So what we see there is that the solid line, the peak, is again near where she's ovulating. So men that she'd like to have a short-term interaction with, that interest peaks during her fertile point in the cycle. But men that she'd like to marry stays pretty much the same over time. This has been interpreted, basically, as when they are fertile, females want those masculine, sexy genes for their offspring. But at other times, they want a good man who's going to stay home and help raise the kids.